Today's lesson will be on dividing mixed numbers. Now, before we actually get into dividing mixed numbers, I want to make sure we remember the order of anytime we do division with fractions and mixed numbers and whole numbers and all those mixed together. So we can remember the order. Step 1 is to make everything a fraction. Step 2, the division sign turns to a multiplication sign. Step 3, we're going to make the reciprocal of the divisor. Remember, the divisor is the second number in the division problem, the number you are dividing by. Step 4 is to cross check. Step 5 is to multiply. Step 5, double check your work by simplifying. Make sure your answer is in simplest form. So to go to the examples, we're going to look at number 1. 5 1/3 divided by 6/7. So step 1 told us that we have to make everything a fraction. So remember to take a mixed number and turn it into a fraction. It is the 3 multiplied by the 5 plus the 1. So I'm going to do 3 times 5, which is 15, plus 1 is 16. So it becomes 16 over 3. And then I'm going to divide that. The 6/7 is already a fraction. So it's going to be 6 over 7. Now, it tells me then that the division sign needs to become a multiplication sign. So my 16 over 3 is going to stay 16 over 3. The division is going to become a multiplication. And my 6 over 7 is going to become 7 over 6. That's what's going to happen. Now it tells me to cross-check. When I look at the 3 and the 7, remember we cross-check this way and that way. So when I cross-check the 3 and the 7, there is not a number besides 1 that can go into both 3 and 7. When I think about the 6 and the 16, I think, well, those are both even numbers, so they can both be divided by 2. So when I divide them by 2, okay, 16 divided by 2 is 8. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And I'm thinking 3 and 8 is as low as it can go because no number besides 1 can go into both 3 and 8. So now I go ahead and do my next step, which is to multiply. I do 8 times 7, which I think is 56. Then I do 3 times 3, which I think is 9. And then, as we know, a fraction is just a division problem. So I just have to go and do 56 divided by 9. And this is where, once again, as you've heard me say, knowing your multiplication tables is very important. Because you should be able to think, well, 9 times 6 is 54. So I know that 9 can go into 56 6 times. And then if I was actually doing the division problem, 9 times 6 is 54. When I think 56 minus 54, I realize that there's 2 left over. My denominator is going to stay the same and is going to be 9. And I think, well, 2 over 9, that is in simplest form. So my final answer is 6 2/9. So we go to our second option here. 7 1/2 divided by 1 1/4. Now the first option, we just divided by a fraction. Here now we have 2 mixed numbers. And we can see here that the 7 1/2 is bigger than the 1 1/4. Okay, so we know because the 1 1/4 is smaller, our answer is going to have to end up as a mixed number because it's going to be able to go in more than one time. That's something that you want to think about when you look at the numbers. Since my bigger number is first, I know no matter what this answer is, it's going to be bigger than 1. So my answer needs to be a mixed number. But I go in, and my first step is always to make everything a fraction. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 1 is 15. So that's 15 over 2. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 1 is 5. So that's going to be 5 over 4. And the division sign. Now, I need to make my division problem a multiplication problem. 15 over 2 will stay 15 over 2. Divide becomes multiply. Remember now I'm making the reciprocal. So 5 over 4 becomes 4 over 5. Now I'm going to think about cross-checking. And when I think about cross-checking, I first look at the 2 and the 4, and I think, well, they can both be divided by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. But then I can also look at the 5 and the 15. Okay, once again, where knowing your multiplication tables really helps you. The 5 and the 15, both divisible by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 15 divided by 5 is 3. Now I'm ready to go ahead and multiply. Can't make those numbers any smaller. They're only divisible by 1. 3 times 2 is 6. 1 times 1 is 1. 6 over 1, once again, it's just the division problem. 6 divided by 1. 6 divided by 1 is 6. All right, so let me get my little wipe out here. All right, sorry about that. So let's look at a third example that'll be something just a little bit different, okay, where this time we're going to make sure that the second number, the divisor, is larger than the first one. Sorry about all this moving around, but I'll work on that as we make more videos, but it's a learning process. So if I look at example number 3, and this is going to be our last example, I'm going to take a number like 3 and 1 over 7, and I'm going to divide that by 4 and 2/3. Now, once again, as a 5th grader, I want to look at this number, and I'm going to realize that, oh, 4 and 2/3 is bigger than 3 and 1/7. Okay, when you divide fractions and mixed numbers, as we talked about before, you can take smaller numbers and divide them by bigger numbers. Okay, we've talked about a lot now with decimals and fractions where our numbers just aren't 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 anymore. We have to realize that there are a lot of numbers that come between 1 and 2. A lot of numbers that become 2 and that come between 2 and 3. And so forth. So we need to look at this situation and know, well, 4 and 2/3 is bigger than 3 and 1/7. So I do that division problem, and I can think now this answer is only going to be a fraction because 4 and 2/3 can't even go into 3 and 1/7 one time because 4 and 2/3 is bigger. It's not even going to be able to go in one time. So I know that my answer is going to be a number that's smaller than 1, which means my answer just needs to be a basic fraction. So that's something that I want to check for when my answer is done. But I go through the same process. Making everything a fraction. 7 times 3 is 21, plus 1 is 22. This becomes 22 over 7. My 4 and 2/3. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 2 is 14. It becomes 14 over 3. Okay? And that becomes a division sign. Now I have to make it a multiplication problem. The 22 over 7 stays 22 over 7. The division sign becomes a multiplication sign. The 14 over 3 becomes 3 over 14. So now I think about cross-checking. I look at the 7 and the 3. There's no number besides 1 that can go into both 7 and 3. So I'm going to leave those alone. I look at 22 and 14. I should realize those are both even numbers. So at the very least, they are divisible by 2. So I want to divide them both by 2. 22 divided by 2 is 11. 14 divided by 2 is 7. So now I look at 7 and 11, and I think to myself, okay, I don't think those can be made any smaller. I think that 1 is the only number that can go into both of them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do my multiplication. I'm going to look first at 11 times 3. 11 times 3 is 33. I'm going to look at 7 times 7, which is 49. And I'm going to think 33 over 49. I think about my times tables and I realize 33 is not really an answer in the times tables, unless I do 11 times 3. But I think of 49. The only way that I'm getting 49 as if I do 1 times 49, or as we just did, 7 times 7. So I'm thinking that's in simplest form, and as I said, if you don't cross-check, you can still get the right answer, but you're going to have to simplify it, and it's going to make it easier if you cross-check and multiply with smaller numbers. Or if you cross-check and it's not the biggest possible number that you're dividing by, you can still get the answer. You're just going to have to go back and simplify. All right, and so hopefully this helps you with dividing mixed numbers.